They say the Middle Ages were a time of endless screams, cold dungeons, and iron machines built only to break the human body. But what if much of that never really happened? What if the most famous torture devices, the Iron Maiden, the Pear of Anguish, the Cradle of Judas, were not instruments of pain at all, but instruments of imagination? Centuries later, tonight, let's step quietly into the shadows of medieval justice and uncover the real truth behind history's darkest myths. Picture a cold stone chamber beneath a castle. Moist air clings to the walls, and the only light comes from a single torch flickering in the corner. For centuries, artists and storytellers have filled our minds with scenes like this. Terrified prisoners chained to the wall, hooded torturers standing beside terrible machines. But here's the twist. Most of these images weren't drawn by people who actually lived in the Middle Ages. They came from the Renaissance and the Victorian era, centuries later, when writers wanted to make the medieval world look cruel, barbaric, and mysterious. In reality, most medieval justice wasn't designed for pain, but for public shame. Back then, people believed that a crime was an oath just against the law. It was against God, Satan's order. Punishment had to restore balance, to show the community that sin had been cleansed. So instead of secret torture chambers, most punishments happened outside, in the daylight. People were tied to wooden stocks, paraded through markets, or forced to wear humiliating signs describing their crimes. The idea wasn't hidden cruelty. It was moral theater. It was about teaching everyone a lesson they would never forget. The goal was repentance, not suffering in darkness. Because pain, they believed, belonged to the soul, not just the flesh. Let's start with the most famous of all, the Iron Maiden. A tall, human-shaped metal coffin lined with sharp spikes, waiting to close on its victim. It's terrifying, it's dramatic, and it's fake. Historians have found no record of any Iron Maiden being used during the medieval period. The first known example appeared in the 19th century, displayed in museums to shock visitors. It wasn't a torture tool, it was a tourist attraction. A creation for those who wanted to believe that the Middle Ages were a nightmare. The truth? Real torture, when it did happen, was far simpler. Ropes, water, or even sleep deprivation. There were no elaborate metal monsters. But make no mistake, fear was powerful. Medieval courts did sometimes use the threat of torture to extract confessions, especially in heresy trials or under the Inquisition. But even then, the act itself was often avoided. Records show that many prisoners confessed after just seeing the tools, without them ever being used. Because the silence, the shadows, and the idea of pain were often enough. The Middle Ages understood something we still do today. Sometimes, the imagination can hurt more than the blade. Scene 5. The Pear, the Rack, and Other Legends. Take the Pear of Anguish, supposedly a metal fruit inserted into the mouth or body and expanded with a screw. Sounds gruesome, but no historical document ever describes it being used. The same goes for the coffin torture, the Spanish donkey, and even the brazen bull. Many of these devices were either misunderstood tools or complete inventions. The rack, however, was real, used in the later Middle Ages, especially in England. But even then, its use was restricted, and it was seen as a desperate measure. Pain was not random. It was meant to reveal truth, however misguided that belief might seem today. So why do we still believe in all these brutal machines? Because over time, fear sells. From 16th century writers to 19th century museums, stories of the Dark Ages became a way to make the present look civilized. By exaggerating medieval cruelty, people could feel superior, more enlightened, more modern. And so the myths grew. Each century added a new layer of horror. By the time photographs and traveling exhibits appeared in the 1800s, the Iron Maiden and her companions were famous, not as history, but as horror. But the real darkness of the Middle Ages wasn't made of iron or spikes. It was the fear that lived in people's hearts. Fear of sin, fear of hell, fear of speaking against authority. It was quiet, unseen, and deeply human. When someone was accused of heresy or witchcraft, the punishment wasn't always physical. It was isolation, exile, the loss of one's community and faith. The kind of pain that doesn't scream, it simply lingers. So the next time you see a spiked coffin in a museum or a movie scene of a screaming prisoner, remember this: the true story of medieval torture is not about how cruel they were, but about how easily fear and myth can twist what we think we know. The Middle Ages weren't just dark, they were misunderstood. A world of faith and fear, of shadow and silence, where the most powerful weapon wasn't the Iron Maiden at all. It was the human imagination.